What's up, guys? UC here from Unqualified Critics. There's something that's been bothering me a little bit about these new consoles, and I want to give you a comprehensive overview of everything you're going to need to get the most out of your consoles. But there's a lot here, so I'm going to go kind of quick. If you got questions, leave them below. I'm going to cover some topics that are pretty big, and if we went all the way on these topics, we're talking probably a 30-40 minute video. So, if you want to know more, you probably should just look up some of these separate topics, especially things like Dolby Atmos. That's a huge topic. There are a lot of words, there are a lot of letters, there's a lot of crazy stuff when we're talking about the new consoles. And these really get into the home theater world. We're stepping away a little bit from the computer gaming world or the console gaming world, and now we're really in home theater territory if you want to get the most out of everything. We're talking television, sound system, in a way that's going to maximize your Xbox Series X. So let's take a look. First off, you're going to need a 120 frames per second television that supports HDR and Dolby Vision. What are HDR and what are Dolby Vision? They're just brand names that mean what's called high dynamic range. Brighter brights, darker darks. It makes a huge difference. I know a lot of you have gamed on HDR before. PC gaming can be HDR if you've got the right monitor and the right graphics cards. But in home theater world, for consoles, it's more complicated than that. Because if you're really trying to get the most out of this, you're not just hooking up your console to your TV. No, you've got to hook up your console to your home theater system or your audio video receiver and then hook that up to your TV. Now we've got three parts in the chain and they all have to work together flawlessly to truly get the most out of this. But first, let's talk about television. My recommendation, if you've got a decent budget, is going to be the LG CX OLED. And you can get it in different sizes, even all the way down to 48 inches, which is kind of cool. This might even make sense for like a super large PC monitor. Now, this television does a few things. It supports AMD FreeSync, which is important for Xbox Series X. I don't believe PlayStation 5 supports FreeSync because it's the scrub console, but I'm not 100% sure. I just haven't been able to find confirmation that they support it. It's going to support Dolby Vision, which is going to be high dynamic range from Dolby, which is actually a little better than HDR10, but it's also going to support HDR10. And so that, what does that mean? That means you can load up Netflix on your console and get truly the best version of it. Or in a lot of cases, gaming. Gears of War supports HDR. A lot of big name games support it, and it makes a big difference. Bottom line, when you look up a TV, if you don't want to buy this one, and I recommend this one because it's OLED technology, organic light emitting diode, just a bunch of words that means you're going to get a fantastic picture. When parts of the picture go black, they really are black. If you've ever looked through an LCD monitor, especially a cheap one, but truly any LCD monitor, when the screen goes black, you actually get little streaks of gray and different halos of light. That's something that always bothered me about monitors, but then when OLED came out, they totally fixed that. This is different tech. You can buy OLEDs from LG, you could buy OLEDs from Sony, but Sony actually buys their OLED panels from LG, repackages them, and puts in their own video processing, which by many reviews I've read worsens the television, but they charge you more for it. So buy whatever OLED you want, but LG is really the company that makes these panels and package them. So I think they're probably the best bet to be trusted. And also the 77 inch has come down in price, $3,500 on Amazon, not too crazy. You can save an extra $47. Right now they got a coupon on it. I'll put a link to all of this stuff below in my description. One other thing I want to point out, some TVs, you don't have to necessarily buy an OLED. You can buy a cheaper television. It'll support these things. But they might have weird phrases like 120 smooth vision and 120 baby's butt or whatever. They put these like cutesy little words together to make it sound like it's 120 frames per second, but they're often not. You might have to really read a spec sheet. If you're not sure about which TV or device to buy, any of the stuff I covered today, I'd recommend you check out rtings.com. That is, in my opinion, the definitive source for getting reviews on AV hardware on the internet. All right, next up, we're going to need some speakers because what are we talking about? We're talking about getting the most out of our Xbox Series X, not just talking about plugging it into a TV and being done. We need a really high-powered sound system. There are two basic choices, a component system or a soundbar. First, we're going to talk about component system, but if this looks too expensive for your budget, then consider a soundbar. First off, you're going to need speakers, unless you already have them. And if you do already have them, you're probably going to want more, because we're going to want to support Dolby Atmos. That's what all the new consoles, including PlayStation 5, support. Dolby Atmos basically just means three-dimensional sound. Sound could kind of feel like it comes from anywhere, and you're truly enveloped in sound. And it's managed through software. The receiver is going to look at where are your speakers placed, and then they're going to balance the audio between those speakers so it sounds like it's coming from a full 360-degree field, more so than just regular surround sound. So here is an Atmos setup. This is a 5.1.2 setup. So the 5 means we got 5 basic speakers. 0.1 means we've got the receiver. And then the 0.2 means we've got 2 Atmos speakers, which are what these are here. It's kind of hard to show it on screen. I guess let me click here. So this is an Atmos speaker. You might be thinking, well, that's all one big tower. It's all one speaker, but it's really not. These are going to face frontward and fire at you. These are going to fire up at your ceiling and bounce the audio back down to create that 3D sound, because 3D doesn't just mean around you from the side. It also means from above. Now, this will only work if you've got smooth ceilings, if you've got a sloped ceiling, like you've got vaulted ceilings. If you're like me and you're in a basement with exposed floor joists, this will not work. There are other ways to get Dolby Atmos sound, but this only works. The upward firing secondary speaker is only going to work if you've got smooth ceilings, and they've got to be at a certain height too. Make sure you look up Dolby Atmos speaker placement guidelines if you really are going to do this, and make sure you read that stuff, because it's going to tell you what kind of speakers you need for your room. But I don't want to spend an hour on Dolby Atmos, so let's set this aside. But we're looking at basically $1,250 for a complete Dolby Atmos speaker setup. You could spend a lot more, or you could spend a little less than this, but believe me, the sky's the limit. You could spend $20,000 on speakers for your Dolby Atmos setup, but we're just going to kind of assume a somewhat reasonable budget here. The next option I want to show you is, let's say you are like me and you've got those exposed floor joists, though, and you can't do the upward firing speakers. Well, you could do ceiling speakers, and they're going to just directly fire down on you. Instead of firing up to bounce the sound off the ceiling, these are just going to shoot from right up in the ceiling down on your head, which sounds really dramatic. Ideally, you want 4 of these in your ceiling for a proper Atmos setup, but you can get away with as few as 2 of them. Next, you need a receiver to power everything. You can reuse older speakers you might have, but you're definitely going to need a new receiver to get the most out of your brand new console. This is going to support 120 frames per second pass-through, at least on paper. And actually, we're going to come back to that because there's a trick here, which is unfortunate. But it's also going to allow you to set up your PlayStation 5 or your brand new Xbox Series console to this receiver to pull out the Dolby Atmos sound, to pull out the high fidelity audio. And you're going to do that over HDMI, by the way. Look at that, 8K. There's only one single 8K input. It's input 7. Kind of sucks you only get one. But you're really going to ignore all these other inputs because they're not going to work for you. You can't use that. The new Xbox doesn't have an optical output, but you wouldn't want to use it anyway because it can't carry the highest fidelity audio possible. That can only come now from HDMI. HDMI has evolved so fast that it completely outpaced optical. And if you were into home theater years ago, you'd think, oh, that's heresy. Optical output is the king. It is not the king. It hasn't been for a while. So get that out of your head. I'm actually glad Xbox dropped optical because a lot of people were relying on it who had hardware where they should have been doing it differently. What you want to do is plug your console into the HDMI port here and then hit the HDMI output and carry the television signal or the video signal to your TV. But to do that, you need an HDMI 2.1 audio video receiver to plug your HDMI 2.1 console into, and then plug the receiver with the output to your HDMI 2.1 television. It is all very possible, and it all is going to work really, really great, except there's one problem. And that one problem is all the AVR systems, audio video receivers on the market right now that I've been able to find that use HDMI 2.1, which is what we need, right? We're doing the right thing if we get HDMI 2.1. Well, not so fast. They all source their 2.1 port chip from the same supplier, and there's a bug in that chip, and it seems to be a bug that is hardware encoded or hardware embedded and cannot be fixed with software. So if you read through what's on the internet, it sounds like all these companies, Yamaha, Marantz, Denon, they're going to be sending you a replacement board to get proper working HDMI 2.1. The long story short, the HDMI port works, but it won't run 120 frames at 4K. It'll just give you a blank screen. And why would you buy all this equipment if you weren't trying to do 120 frames at 4K? I mean, that's the reason we're here. That's why we're talking about getting the most out of our new 120 frame 4K consoles, and yet we can't quite get there. So I would recommend holding off on a new receiver for a few months until they get this fixed. But if you buy it now, they are promising a fix for you. I just don't see a reason to invest in this stuff now if we can't actually fully use it. All right, now back over on the side of what should you purchase. Again, if you look at the receiver and the speakers, you're talking about $3,000 for a pretty decently good system that's going to give you Dolby Atmos. And again, you could do way better. You could spend a fortune. There's always somebody in the comments saying, oh, I've got a $27,000 preamp and processor combo and this stuff's junk. Yes, that's true. But for normal people, this is going to be what you're probably going to strive for. But if that's too expensive, and I can understand, I mean, $3,000 is a lot of money to spend on a toy, and that doesn't include your TV, by the way, that's just for the audio. If that's too expensive, consider a soundbar. Soundbars have come a long way, and I say this as someone who used to hate soundbars. If I saw a Samsung soundbar in your house, I'd throw that thing away, right? It used to be just absolute. I'd rip that thing off the wall, and you'd thank me later because you're so glad that I saved you from that crappy experience. But they're good now, and I don't own this soundbar, but it has really good ratings online from sources I trust. There are other options too, but they have basically a ton of little speakers built in to this front unit, and then they've even given you some rear speakers, and you can just plug your Xbox directly into the soundbar. You don't need separate speakers and a receiver anymore. Now, I've read that this is HDMI 2.1. I do not know if this has that bug that the dedicated Yamaha and Denon receivers have. I don't know that. So if you buy this, you probably want to buy it from Amazon or somewhere where you could return it if you need to. So buyer beware. I really don't know for sure. But this model number has great reviews. It supports HDMI 2.1 and it supports Dolby Atmos. So this will get you everything spec-wise. Is it going to be as ground shaking as the full component system I showed you earlier with all those different speakers? No. But it's going to get you a lot of the ways there, and it's only going to cost you $1,400. I mean, that's the price of that receiver itself is actually $1,700. And then you got to buy the speakers. So this is for everything all in one. Especially helpful if you don't already own some really good speakers that you can add to, and you have to actually buy everything from scratch. So that is my take on everything you need to get the most out of the consoles. This includes PlayStation 5, but especially Xbox Series X, because it uses AMD FreeSync, is affected by this HDMI 2.1 bug. So it's a lot of words. I'm going to put links below to everything you need if you want to buy it. And again, remember, if you buy that receiver now, you will get a fix later. You may just want to hold off on it, I don't know, but I'm going to put the links below in case you're interested in pulling the trigger now or just doing some research on your own. And if you do want to continue to look into this, I'd recommend looking up Dolby Atmos online. I'd recommend looking up rtings.com, which will give you a great rundown of all your different options. This is a fantastic resource that goes into tons of detail. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you later. Hey, consider hitting that join button to support the channel, and thanks so much for watching.
Dripping lights paint the sky.